Let's move on to Jordan versus Kerr. The fight. The fight that's been talked about for years and is finally explained.
Yeah.
What are you guys' thoughts about that? Is it the same as you thought or different?
I think
Yeah.
for me, it was they led on to believe it was a little bit more than what it really was. It really wasn't. They made it seem like it was just an all-out brawl or something like that. He Curve hit him in the chest and then he hit him in the eye, and he got sent away. That was it. I mean, like, but for him to, the so to speak, like stand up to Michael Jordan and gain their respect, that said a lot. But then I think about the Scott Burrell situation, how he just let Jordan roll over him like that. It was interesting, to say the least.
I had a different takeaway with the Burrell thing. Brian, what do you have on the Kerr Jordan?
Yeah, it was exactly how I pictured that it would be. I didn't imagine it to be like an all-out brawl, but just like just a small scuffle. And I always, had known that Phil threw Michael out of practice after that. But then you got to look at Steve Kerr's background at that point in time. He had lost his father. His father was, I think, assassinated in Beirut, Lebanon, just a few years before then. I think it was during the time that Steve Kerr was either in high school or he was at the University of Arizona. So we talked last week about, or was it 2 weeks ago, about Tony Kukoc. Do we feel sorry for him because he came up in a crazy situation over there where he's from? Well, Steve Kerr also had some crazy situations he had to deal with. So, and it's not surprising that he stood up for himself. And for him to be the smallest guy on the team, guard Michaal Jordan during a practice, take one in the eye, and still answer the phone later that night, to talk things out. Shows you the character of the guy. So it's not surprising to see later on like how valuable Steve Kerr was on the court after that altercation.
Jay.
To me, it makes me look at Phil Jackson a little bit more. I think he knows his cast of characters, and I think he might have knew that if Jordan kept picking with Steve Kerr, that something might happen. That's why he kept calling the fouls. I think Phil knows when things might be getting a little bit out of hand, and he just lets it get there just to see, just let the guys see how far they're taking it and have them be able to reconcile themselves. So it made me look at the genius of Phil a little bit more.
That's a great point too, because and he threw MJ out of the practice, right? He
Yeah,
didn't side with MJ just because he was, their alpha on their team. That's a
yeah,
great point.
Maybe like a message to the rest of the team then. Yeah, that is an excellent point. The game within the game, I guess, right?
yeah.
One of the things that surprised me is I never knew what happened. You just hear that, oh, Jordan punched Kerr. I figured that Kerr just kept fouling him and pissing him off, and he just got mad, just turned around and punched him in the eye. So when they told us what actually really happened, I was like, okay, I can understand that. And Steve Kerr the other day said that, that story was so much larger than it should have been, because he said every year there's 2 or 3 fights in practice that are swinging when players are swinging at each other. That's a known thing. And everyone blew it way out of proportion because it's like, oh, Michael Jordan punched Steve Kerr. But I was surprised also that Jordan asked for Kerr's number and called him and apologized to him on the phone and said, look, man, it's not about you. I apologize. Da, da, da. And they had a good conversation, because the
Mm.
Jordan that we think we know, especially through the first 7.6 episodes, is, you know, I may be wrong, but you're not going to hear me ever tell you I'm wrong. I was just thinking of something different. And this time he straight up said, hey, I knew I was wrong. I called Steve and I apologized to him. So that's one thing, another thing that I didn't really know ahead of time, that I was kind of like, wow. So Corey, you brought up Scott Burrell. You guys enjoy that part of the episode? Because I was actually, it's not what I had expected. Jay, what did you think about the whole Scott Burrell thing?
um, People making it seem like Scott Burrell was a good guy for taking the high road, but I think Scott Burrell he was just a softie. I think Jordan was trying to make him tougher, but Scott he didn't take it. It's just it wasn't in him. And maybe Jordan thought he saw something in him, but it just wasn't in him. So I don't know. I'm kind of disappointed in Scott Burrell.
Brian?
Yeah, I'm kind of along that lines too. Jordan said at the outset that he saw Scott Burrell was a guy that had a lot of talent, and he came from a good college program. I mean, UConn is nothing to sneeze at. They had Coach Calhoun. You had guys like Ray Allen, and they made deep runs in the tournament. And so you get a guy coming in from UConn, good size, think he's talented, and you're just trying to pull out the best out of him. It's probably one of those things where Scott Burrell was a very talented guy, talented enough to get on a roster, but just was just satisfied with that. Didn't want to be the guy, didn't really probably care if they won championships or not. So it's just one of those things where I think that he just had that type of personality where, unlike Steve Kerr, Jordan knew he wasn't going to get a rise out of Scott Burrell no matter what he tried to do.
Corey.
And for me, just some of the things that Michael Jordan was saying, like we would have to fight. We would have to hash this thing out. I wouldn't have been able to do it. Like no man, like the things that he was saying, like you just have to be some kind of different to be able to take that. I just couldn't fathom another man telling me that, and I'm just sitting here just like, oh whatever, Mike being Mike, like no. And Mike only did that to certain guys. Like you never heard about this going on with Charles Oakley. Like you never heard this going on with Scottie Pippen. You didn't hear about this with Dennis Rodman. Like it was just that it's just because I think Mike was weak doing that. I think Mike was the one that was weak. He only picked on certain guys.
But
He did try that with Horace Grant, but he didn't get too far with that.
Go ahead, Jay.
from what I heard, I think he was with everybody, but it was people that like Bill Cartwright who threatened to kill him. Like it was certain guys that he did try with, but they always checked him. And I think once people checked him, that's when he backed off a little bit.
He keeps on saying, if you can't handle me in practice, how are you going to handle the other teams in the league? He definitely was a different cat. The thing I took away from Scott Burrell is I thought maybe that was a story where he drove someone to quit. And I actually laughed a lot during that part because it was nothing like I thought. I didn't care about him sitting on the sideline saying, come on, ho, come on, bitch. And the reason why is because and I think, Brian will probably agree with this because he's played organized sports. I haven't played organized sports, but I know I've gone to the court with my boys every day of the summer for 3 or 4 years. And once you have your quote unquote teammates and those are the people you see all the time, you start talking a lot more casual than you would, a complete stranger. And I know that, the way, my friends and I would talk to each other playing basketball and just hanging out because there was no malice. It was all contact. But the fact that even Michael was like, and he started laughing. He goes, he was such a nice guy. I could not get him to crack. And so Jordan accepted, that Scotty was that guy. And he joked with him. They showed him joking with him after the game, but they were all fun and games afterwards. And even Scott Burrell said, when you're practicing and when you're playing the games, he's ruthless. Outside of that, he's the nicest guy ever. And so I think that kind of holds merit to the narrative about, his interaction with Scott Burrell. Now, was he hard as hell on some of his, teammates? I think so. Was he a little bit too hard? I'm not that guy, but I'm not sitting with 6 chips and consider the GOAT either. And Jordan said winning has a price, leadership has a price, and we'll get to that. But for me, the Scott Burrell piece was surprising, but in a good way. I actually laughed a few times during that. I was like, oh, man, it's nothing. So when I see Jordan kind of sitting back with his legs crossed in practice saying, get that layup, ho, to me, that's just nothing.
Yeah, you got to have those guys on your team because not everybody, befits the same exact attitude and demeanor on any sports team. You always have the alpha on every one of your teams. You always have 1 or 2 guys that are top dogs. And then you have the guys who are your good soldiers, they're really good at what they do, you can depend on them. And then you have your guys who are just kind of like Scott Burrell, or you have like your class clown, where they just don't take things too seriously. So it just rounds out a team, and he was just the one guy that Michael couldn't get under. If he couldn't make him better, I saw that he was just trying to have fun with him and try to get under his skin. And even doing that, he wasn't successful at it either. So
because we all know the league is full of people in NBA, probably baseball, for sure basketball. They're just trying to get to the league. to them, that's the pinnacle of success. They just want to have a good time, have a good game, but for some people, that's not enough.
Right.
You can't go into the Ravens defense, 10 years ago and just kind of like, I'm just happy to be here, because Ray Lewis is gonna get in your ass,
Yep.
and
And you had T Sizzle too. So
and
you
T
had your
Sizzle,
one
they're
and
gonna get
one
in your
keepers.
ass, yeah, because they say that we wouldn't, they said Jordan never asked anybody to do something he wouldn't do.
Right.
So when leaders lead by example, it's kind of hard to bark back if you're not giving it your effort. Like I wouldn't be happy with people talking to me like that. I don't have that killer instinct. I do up here, but physically, I know I don't have the gifts. So I don't know if I could have handled that type of leader. And maybe like Will Purdue, looking back in time, I would appreciate it. Just like when you yell at your kids, once you see your kids starting to reciprocate and do what you yelled at them for, you feel a little good about it. Although it takes 15, 20 years, and just like being a parent, I've never done this before. I can only be a parent the only way I know how. And I think with Jordan, a lot of it was I failed in my personal life, losing to my brother all the time. I've got all this other stuff going on. I've lost to the Pistons. None of these people have had to do that, and they're not hungry. I need them to be as hungry as me, but they don't have the experience, to fall back on that. And it's not their fault. They just happen to be, playing basketball with Michael Jordan. So I think for him to drive them so hard and expect them to be like him, that's a 50-50 thing, I think.
Yeah.
Will Purdue, Jordan was an asshole and a jerk, but we needed that. So kind of going just like we were just talking about Burrell, leadership styles. I mean, what do you guys think at the end of the day with the results? Would you trade rings? So like Will Purdue, even Burrell getting that championship, would you trade that championship for a nicer leader on your team?
No, absolutely not.
Because we all
Absolutely.
have our dignity, we all have our pride, and that's
Right.
dignity is good. Pride never helps; it only hurts.
Right. No, I mean, it's just from the experience of playing organized sports for so much of my life. I did when I was younger have leaders who were pretty cutthroat and push you and push you and push you until you were over the edge. Um, and it's that perspective, kind of like with Will Purdue's perspective, where later on down the line you see uh, the reasons why they were doing what they were doing, and then eventually when it came up to be my turn later on in the years, where I was one of the top guys on my teams, I'd push, my teammates the same way. And honestly, I wasn't nice about it. I really wasn't. I mean, I remember one time where on the baseball team that I played on in ninth grade, I was chewing this one guy out who was one of the bench guys who drank up all the fucking water. It's like, well, we got all the starters out on the fucking field, but then you drinking up all the water, and when we come into the dugout, there ain't nothing left. It's like one of those things where you expect like little things like that shit being available to everybody in the dugout to the type of output you're putting out on the field. You want to have that type of leadership, at least from my perspective, and you want to be able to be driven. So I wouldn't be of the opinion where I would trade in you know uh, a less mean leader in exchange for rings. I would rather have the rings and be pushed to the edge.
Remember Ed Reed with that speech? I posted it on my Instagram. And as a grown adult, you're an adult now. You're not a little kid, and I think that's where people take issue. It's like, okay, if I'm 14 and you're a senior and you're yelling at me to get me better and you're demeaning me, that's just part of life. It sucks, but it's part of life. And it's not saying it's acceptable. But once you're an adult and you're a man, you're like, who you talking to like that? I'm a grown man. And I've had those moments myself, like, man, I'm a grown ass man. You don't talk to me like that. But that speech that Ed Reed was talking about, yelling at people in the locker room, like, man, why is that trash? Pick that shit up, man.
Right.
Pick that
Mm.
shit up. You expect to win. How you gonna win if you leaving? So there's always that guy, like you were saying, and he's gonna rub some people the wrong way. But Corey,
I mean, I'm conflicted. I'm listening to both sides, and it's hard for me to pick a side because ultimately you played to win championships. But another thing is, it's good. I'm in the NBA too. I'm a grown man. I got mortgage. I got stuff I take care of. You know, like some people, their parents don't even talk to them like that, or haven't never talked to them like that.
yeah.
And so to have another guy that's your your equal or um your peer talk to you like that. I mean, I guess the result you get the championship or whatever, but still the fact is that it's kind of hard to. You have to be a special type of man to be able to take that. Like that's why I keep going back to Scott Burrell because I just know how I am. I personally I wouldn't been able to take that, and I probably wouldn't have won that championship, been off that team or something, because I just know how I am. Like I just don't allow anybody to just run over me like that.
Yeah, I think when you look back, and I agree with you, it's kind of split, right? Because you play the result. If you look back and you're like, man, that was hard as hell. He was an asshole, but man, we won a lot of championships because of that style. Man, I'm glad it happened. Versus, man, if we had a better leadership, he wasn't being such an asshole. Maybe we would have won. So you always play the
But
result.
what if it wasn't effective? What if they didn't win the championship and he was like that? Like,
Then that becomes the reason why they didn't win.
Right.
Yeah. I think that's the difference between a leader and an asshole is the win. I think that's the makes the difference. If you win, you're a leader. If you don't, you're an asshole.
And that's a great point. I'm glad you said something like that because you see a lot of people on teams, and it's not even unorganized sports. You can play any pickup game. You always have that one asshole that's like, "Hey man, why aren't you getting down low and grabbing rebounds?" Well, what the fuck are you doing camping over in the perimeter? You know what I mean? It's
I
but
Brian, hold on.
go
I
ahead.
fucking hate that guy. When you're playing pickup basketball and there's someone's uncle, but you just now meeting the dude though,
Yeah.
and you look at
Yeah,
him like you ain't got no championship rings. What have you won? You don't talk to me like that, and I think that's a
right,
big difference.
right. And so the thing is though is that when you have those types of confrontations, within, say they are within teams, that's just part of it. It's one of those things where you look back, years from when you're finished playing, and you're thinking about, man, what did we do? While we were, teammates, and you think about all the wins, you think about all the losses, you think about all the fights, all the scuffles, the times where you didn't want to be around so and so. But at the very end of it, it's true. It's a brotherhood. Like, you miss that time that you had in the locker room. I miss all those times on, going to road games and us, doing your mama jokes, the entire time there and back. You know what I mean? It's shit like that. But it's like that saying where brothers fight, right? Because you are brothers when you're wearing the same uniform and you're trying to win together. You're trying to push each other. Sometimes you fight, but when you win, and then you just squash it at the very end of the game, and you just go on to the next practice, the next game. It just adds to the dynamic of being on the team.
So when Jordan finishes episode 7 and he's talking about what it takes to win, what are your thoughts? Because like I said, that's one of the few times we've seen him show some actual emotion, and he's actually talking about himself. I have some thoughts about that. Jay, what are you thinking? Like, what was going
um,
through your mind?
I mean, it was powerful. It was interesting, and I think at that he might have been getting emotional because he probably, as he was saying it, he probably was really like thinking back, like, "Wow, this is really what it takes." I don't think he processed it before he said it, and I think that's might have been why he got a little bit emotional because while he was saying it, he was thinking about all of the workouts, all of the practices, all of the arguments, all of the losses, and all of the times he didn't hit the game winners. I think all of it hit him at that moment while he was saying like, "This is what it takes to win," and I think that quick moment, that quick clip is probably inspiring America. I think that was probably one of the most powerful parts of the whole documentary to me.
That that felt like it could have been the last thing they would say at the end of episode 10, right? So, Brian, what
Yeah.
are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, he's trying to say that this is me. All my experiences lead up to this, and it's he's the ultra competitor, and there's really nothing he can do about that. So, and to know that it did come with a price, it came with a price of fame. He wasn't anonymous anymore after the times that he went into the league and started winning. He wanted to win so bad because that's what he was born to do. But it came at the expense of his own anonymity. It came at the expense of probably really close personal relationships that he had, previous to that point in his life. But I think when it comes down to it, it's just he could not change that piece of himself. And if anybody even tried to make him change, that's a very hurtful thing to think about, because you should think about somebody striving for perfection and striving to be the best, and all in the spirit of competition as something positive. So why should anybody ask him to change, what he is and what he was made to do? I think that's really what brought out that emotion, because that this is him. That when it comes down to it, that's him in a nutshell, and nobody can change that.
Corey.
The players benefit from a lot of success with his leadership style being that way because of the way they did respond to it. And I keep on going back and forth with it, but they responded to what he did with great results and they ended up winning the championship, six total championships for the teams that was together during that stretch. But he also said in there that that's the way he played. If that's not the way you play, then don't play that way. But that's the way he played. That's his mentality. It's kind of hard to change a guy from who he was, into something else like where you think you should probably take a softer approach. But that's not how I play. Then you taking that edge off of him. Then would they even play as good as they did if Jordan wasn't like that? So a lot of players benefit from that success because of it. So it's kind of hard to just take it, just eliminate it, because you eliminate that, you eliminating a piece of that the championship run. That goes into the pot too. All that goes into the pot. Would they win a championship? You can't really tell because that's how he was, and that's what impacted the fuel to them to go on to win 6 championships.
Yeah, while you were talking, I was thinking it reminds me a lot about coaching. You always see the coaching in like football, right? You have the players coach, and then you have the coach that rides your ass. And some players respond better to one than the other. Everybody wants to have a players coach, but the one that rides your ass takes a certain style. And I think watching Jordan do that, and it's the same as like all of you said, I agree with all of you on that. I felt that, he's basically saying that's just who I am. I can't change. I only know one way to do it. I may not have always done it right. Um, but I'm a competitor. I love this game so much and I wanted to win it no matter the cost. And I think while he's saying that, he's processing, kind of like Jay was saying, he's thinking about a bunch of different things. The price is, you know, I had to be an asshole to my teammates. The price is, they're going to look back at me as being the jerk. I'm not going to be the most likable guy because all I cared about was winning no matter what it takes. And I think a part of it also was maybe he was kind of like, man, I'm sorry I had to be like that. That was the only way. I'm really sorry I had to be like that. I didn't want to be like that, but that's the only way I know how to do it. And I think that the emotion was kind of getting to him because of that.